Cheers, guys. Epix 911, welcome to the Elitist Geek VR news for Saturday, October 22nd, 2016. Man, it is nice to be home. Yesterday, I did absolute jack crap all, except gaming. And I didn't film it, I didn't edit it, I just played, and damn, after a couple of weeks of not being able to, it's been really nice. So I jumped back into Elite Dangerous, spent quite a few hours playing that, probably about, I'd say 3 to 5 of the time last night. And the first 2D game I've played in a long time, Civilization 6, check that out. But mostly it was VR, and it was damn nice. Like I said, just to lay back and be able to enjoy it. I'm going to do some more of that, except it'll be on the editing, video side of the equation. So that'll be good as well. So let's jump into the news, guys, and talk about platform exclusivity. And I know I've sounded negative about that in the past, but I think there's a line. I think there's a line that can be drawn between when it's acceptable to me personally, and I know that line's going to vary for others out there. For me, the line is, look, if it's exclusivity like Halo is probably a really good example. Generally, Halo gets released, and I know there's been exceptions, but generally it's gotten released when there's already been a fairly significant user base. So the exclusivity wasn't from the point of view of financially compensating a developer necessarily, right? Saying, okay, look, we're going to pay you for the exclusivity because we're a new console, we don't have a huge user base. It was exclusivity almost for exclusivity. You are only going to do business with us. That's the side of exclusivity that I tend to disagree with. I'm actually okay with the VR side, at least initially, like take an eValkyrie, for example, right? It's done because we recognize there's not a huge install base. They come out for the Rift first. Now they're available for the Sony PlayStation VR, and they will be available for the HTC Vive. I don't have a problem with that. And that's essentially the gist of this article. So it's an interview with Jason Rubin, who is now head of Oculus content. He's a former Crash Bandicoot veteran and co-founder of Naughty Dog Studios. And those are really the points that he brings up, that look, without exclusivity, there's not going to be a hell of a lot of gaming, and we get that old catch-22 egg chicken scenario where if there's not a lot of consoles, why would anybody make games for them? And if there's no games, why would anybody want to buy the console? So absolutely, I get that. And essentially, again, those are the points that he brings up in that article. But interesting nonetheless, have a read in the description below. Next up, Oblong Industries raising $65 million for Minority Report style gesture technologies. And this is a neat story because it's a story where CEO John Underkoffler, he's the CEO of Oblong Industries, where his career's kind of almost come full circle, which is really cool. Not many people can say that. He started out as a researcher at MIT Media Labs and, did that for a while. Then he worked as a science advisor to the Minority Report movie. And as you may or may not know, they had a lot of gesture technology in that movie, which, a lot of us looked at the time and said, wow, that would be pretty cool. They're not the only ones to have ever done that, but I did like the version that they showed. It was a version that seemed a lot less far-fetched than some of them out there. In other words, one that me personally, when I was looking at it, could actually see be a reality, within decades, as opposed to, wow, we're not going to see that for 100 years type thing. It's that far-fetched, right? So he did that as a science advisor. Then he founds Oblong Industries. He's their CEO, and he's raised $65 million to do what? Work on the exact same technology that he once advised on in the movie. So very cool that that's kind of come full circle for him, and great that there's people like him out there pushing VR forward in all kinds of awesome ways, including gesture technology. I think that is something, especially for, forget games. Obviously, there's all kinds of uses for that in games, but just straight business applications. There's all kinds of use for that. medical industry, you name it, teaching, definitely a use for that type of technology. So it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. Now, this next one, guys, this one pisses me off a little bit, so I'm going to just schlock it up a bit here. Definitely a bit of a pissoir, and pissed me off, quite frankly. Now, what I'm talking about is UK's biggest retailer, Game. They have actually been charging, I shouldn't say have been because they still are, charging people to play Sony PlayStation demo games. Now, I should have a tweet up here, and they've actually been blocking tweets from people reporting on this and commenting on this. But check it out. £5 for 10 minutes or 15 quid for 30 minutes of play. I'm going to say it, and I'm probably going to say it incorrectly for a chuckle, but absolute bollocks. Absolute bollocks. And you know what? There's a Dutch word very similar in terms of literal meaning of bollocks, except we assign it to a person, you know, when they're a bit of an ass. And in Dutch, we would say klootzak. And that's what the guy who came up with this at Game is. Absolutely, 100%. We are supposed to be trying to market virtual reality in a friendly, non-aggressive, non-commercial way. There are people out there who virtual reality could appeal to that may not necessarily be gamers. Charging is not the way to get that buy-in. You get that buy-in by lowering the barrier to entry. And free is about as low as you can get, right? Because there's a certain amount of trust, and we're going to get into that with some other stories here later, that you are subjecting these people to. You are putting them in a position where they may be uncomfortable, whatever. To throw money on top of that is just ludicrous. It's absolutely a scam, and I don't know what else to say. And I would love to hear from any of you in the UK. Have you been to a local game store? Have you seen this in action? Is this, you know, my understanding is just a few. And obviously like to hear from people all over the world on this. You know, what are your opinions on this? Because Electronics Boutique, Walmart, Best Buy, no store around here in Canada or in the US that I've seen is doing this. And nor should they ever contemplate doing this. You know, it's one thing if you're an arcade, and that's fine. I get that. That's how you make your revenue. But even then, would you be doing it with free demo games? Probably not. You'd be using full retail versions. So all kinds of no and negativity all over this for me. So yeah, interested in hearing what you guys think. Let me know in the comments below. Link to the article, and like I said, there's a lot of tweets that we're dealing with this. All right, what about episodic gaming and VR? So there's an article on TechRadar where the author Gerald Lynch basically says it's a match made in heaven. And kind of like with exclusivity, I think there's a time and a place for episodic games. And I think at this stage, and you know what, maybe this is a bit of a change of mind for me. I don't think so. I think I've been pretty consistent, but if I was, you know, perhaps a bit more negative in the past on this, I think I've come around, you know, being part of this launch with all these different VR solutions out there, that I do understand, like with exclusivity, the need for developers to mitigate their risk, right? And we said that with the other examples, and I think episodic gaming is a way to do that. And Gerald brings up some really good points. He talks about past successes, Walking Dead, Game of Thrones, that have done it and done it successfully. He also talks about minimizing the risk, so the economic reality, right? And we've talked about that with the other story. But it's also a way to put your feelers out with a product, right? And course correct. So you put all your eggs in a basket with a game, people don't like it, that's it. You're pretty much done. I mean, you can patch to a certain degree. With episodic gaming, you can do a lot more course correction. And you can base that course correction on the feedback, the reception of that episode. So yeah, I think especially with virtual reality, all that much more important. Absolutely. Just a good article from that point of view. Have a read. As with the other, let me know what you think. Next up, we have an article from the Daily Herald on the quest for VR's first killer app. And the author is Pavel Alpayev, if I'm pronouncing his name correct. He talks to various devs in the industry, including Andy Moore, CEO of Radial Games, who says, look, these are things that have never been invented before. You cannot look them up. And absolutely true. What I got from the article was, look, with all this work going on in all these different areas, controllers, controller types, haptic feedback on controllers, tracking, room scale, seated, there's so many different things going on. The article didn't ask this directly, but it got me thinking, is the environment right for a killer app? In other words, could a killer app even exist right now? Could it exist on the Rift with a gamepad? Does it need a better controller scheme? My personal opinion is, look, if a game is good enough, and I've said this about graphics before, and I would extend that to control schemes and motion tracking, I would say absolutely. It should highlight the technology, which is virtual reality, but it doesn't need to be beholden to all these various check marks like, yeah, motion tracking, haptic feedback, blah, 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 blah. So personally, I think, yes, it could survive in an environment like having a gamepad controller. That's why I'm always so hopeful that just around the corner, it's close, it's coming. The article takes the tone that it's not so close because of all these things still being in play and being in motion, that it hasn't stabilized enough to allow a killer app to survive and thrive. So what do you guys think? Agree with me, agree with him, somewhere in between? Kind of where do you stand on that? Next up, yes, I will admit I had a chuckle, but it brings up some really good points. And that's the video that was circulating. So this is a Telegraph, a UK article about snooker legend Ronnie O'Sullivan. And it's only about 17 seconds. But the poor guy, he's got the HMD on his head. He's lining up for a shot. And probably like he's done tens of thousands of times in real life, he leans over the table, to make the shot. Only it's a virtual table, and the poor guy goes ass over tea kettle, literally plummets to the ground. There's, shock, horror. Oh my God, are you okay? Are you okay? He dusts himself off, and he's really dusting off his pride more than anything else because of just going, launching himself ass over tea kettle. And as soon as he indicates he's probably all right, and he says, I was just trying to lean in on the table, that's scary. Then the laughing started, right? His buddies were like, okay. Or those around him. He's not hurt, maybe other than just pride. We can laugh. And I do think it's funny, but here's the point that I was talking about. And because there's been other clips like this. Like there's the clip in the mall. I don't know if it's the dad, I can't remember, or the guy's buddy where he gets pushed when he's doing some kind of VR coaster ride or something. And he just loses it. Like his balance is gone, right? And his buddy's just laughing. It is a buddy, now that I think about it, hysterically. I think that happens, and this is just a personal opinion, to people who are just generally gaming naive, meaning they've skipped all previous generations of gaming. Like maybe very casually, maybe they even played an arcade game in their life, but they're not what most of us are in the sense that they do a lot of traditional gaming before they had this VR experience. In other words, they skipped all of that and went right to VR. The reason I say that, I would like to think that most of us, we've probably gone off balance, had a little bit of fun with VR, but at the end of the day, we know it's not a real frickin' table. It's a virtual table. We're not going to try to lean on it like that and get hurt, right? As opposed to somebody who maybe skipped that. Because I can see, my wife, daughter, not having that happen to them. But my mother, hell yeah. Other than Candy Crush and Facebook, I think I would say she's not a gamer, right? And I could definitely as a result, see something like that happening to her. Next up, and the last story here, this one has to do with medical cadavers. And there's an application, the ability to do away with medical cadavers when we're talking about anatomy or teaching anatomy. The app is called Organon 3D, and it allows for a fairly detailed study of the human body. But can it replace cadavers? And the study of anatomy actually has a really interesting history. Like, forget what the Greeks and Romans were doing. That was all rudimentary stuff, absolutely important and vital for what they would start doing, during the late Renaissance. But I'm talking more about that Renaissance era and some of the sordid history. Like, where did these cadavers come from? Were they people generously donating their bodies to science like the majority of cadavers now? Hell no. These were often bodies dug up illegally by gravediggers who sold them illegally to the universities to do their anatomy lessons. And other times they were criminals, maybe, right? Who, the law and people of that time felt had zero rights to a burial or any of that other stuff, and would end up on a slab in an operating theater. So, yeah, it's got a really neat history, but could it replace? Personally, my thoughts, well, we'll get to that in a second, but Michelle Moskova, she's a senior lecturer on anatomy. She doesn't seem to think so, and she's got an interesting quote. She says, "The students learn far more from a cadaver than just anatomy. They learn respect for the human body and the patient. They learn compassion. They learn humanity. This is something that computers cannot teach." And I agree with her that at this point in time, yeah, it probably can't replace a cadaver. But do I think in the future it could? Absolutely. As somebody who works very close with computers and technology, I know a program is only as good as the person writing it, right? What gets put into it? Can we relay things like empathy, compassion via software? Absolutely. Not perfectly right now, not even close in some applications, but I'm confident in the future, yes, we would be able to. Is it going to require the VR to be so realistic that it appears like an actual body on the table? I don't know. I don't know the details. I'm just confident we will get there because there's all kinds of variables involved. That's one of them, having it look like a realistic patient, but I think there's more, right? So either way, interesting article. That one's from the Huffington Post. Check it out in the link below. Well, guys, that is it. I'm going to get to some gaming now, of which I will document today, some of that, unlike yesterday. So as always, cheers, and definitely, guys, catch you on the VR flip side.